Dr. Sarah Chen had always been different from other military medics. While her colleagues focused on battlefield medicine and trauma surgery, she studied ancient healing practices alongside modern medical techniques. Her peers at the naval base in San Diego often whispered behind her back, calling her methods unconventional and questioning whether someone so small and soft-spoken belonged in military medicine. Sarah stood barely 5 feet tall, with gentle hands that seemed too delicate for the harsh realities of combat medicine. She had joined the Navy Medical Corps not for glory or recognition, but because she believed healing was a calling that transcended traditional boundaries. Her grandmother, a traditional Chinese healer, had taught her that true healing required understanding both the body and the spirit. The other medics doubted her abilities when she arrived at the base 6 months earlier. They watched skeptically as she incorporated meditation techniques into her patient care and used acupuncture alongside standard pain medication. Commander Williams, the head of the medical unit, had received several complaints about her unorthodox methods. Some senior officers questioned whether she had the mental toughness required for military medicine. Sarah knew about the doubts surrounding her. She heard the whispered conversations in the corridors and noticed how conversations stopped when she entered a room. The other medics treated her with polite distance, never fully accepting her as one of their own. They saw her quiet demeanor and gentle approach as weakness, unable to recognize the steel determination that lay beneath her calm exterior. Despite the skepticism, Sarah continued her work with unwavering dedication. She spent extra hours studying both traditional and modern healing techniques, preparing herself for whatever challenges might come. Her patients, however, began to notice something different about her care. They felt more relaxed during treatments and seemed to heal faster under her guidance. The base had recently increased its training intensity due to rising tensions in the Middle East. Special operations teams, including Navy SEALs, were conducting more frequent and dangerous exercises. The medical staff knew that sooner or later, they would face situations that would test every skill they possessed. Sarah often volunteered for the most challenging shifts, working with patients who had been written off by other medics. She had a particular gift for connecting with soldiers who were struggling with both physical injuries and emotional trauma. Her combination of Eastern and Western healing practices created a unique approach that seemed to reach patients on multiple levels. The naval base buzzed with activity as various units prepared for deployment. Sarah watched the SEALs during their training exercises, noting their incredible physical conditioning and mental toughness. She wondered if she would ever have the opportunity to prove herself with such elite warriors. Little did she know that fate was preparing to test not only her medical skills, but her courage and determination in ways she had never imagined. Her colleagues continued to underestimate her, viewing her small stature and quiet confidence as signs of weakness. They failed to see the years of rigorous training she had undergone, the countless hours she had spent mastering both traditional and modern healing arts. Sarah carried herself with humble confidence, knowing that her true test would come not in the safety of the base hospital, but in the crucible of real crisis. The tension on the base was growing, and everyone could feel that something significant was approaching. Sarah prepared herself mentally and spiritually for whatever challenges lay ahead, drawing on both her medical training and the ancient wisdom passed down through generations of healers in her family. She had no idea that within days, she would face a situation that would change not only her life, but the lives of 3 of the military's most elite warriors. The emergency call came through at 0300 hours on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Sarah was pulling a double shift in the base medical facility when the radio crackled to life with urgent coordinates and casualty reports. A Navy SEAL training exercise had gone catastrophically wrong in the mountains 50 miles north of the base. 3 SEALs were trapped in a remote canyon after a rock slide, with injuries so severe that standard evacuation procedures were impossible. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, Petty Officer First Class Marcus Rodriguez, and Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Walsh had been conducting a high-altitude reconnaissance training mission when an unexpected storm triggered the massive rock slide. The avalanche of boulders and debris had not only trapped them in a narrow canyon, but it also made helicopter evacuation impossible due to the unstable terrain and continued rockfall. The base commander gathered his most experienced medical team for an emergency briefing. The situation was unprecedented in its complexity. The injured SEALs were trapped approximately 2 miles into a treacherous canyon system, accessible only by a dangerous climb through unstable rock formations. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, with temperatures dropping below freezing and visibility decreasing by the hour. Dr. Peterson, the senior trauma surgeon, studied the topographical maps with growing concern. The terrain was so challenging that even reaching the injured men would require technical climbing skills that most medical personnel didn't possess. The rescue team would need to carry full medical equipment while navigating loose rock, narrow ledges, and potentially unstable overhangs. When the commander asked for volunteers for the rescue mission, Sarah stepped forward without hesitation. The room fell silent as her colleagues exchanged skeptical glances. Dr. Peterson immediately voiced his concerns about sending someone of her small stature on such a physically demanding mission. Several other medics suggested that only the strongest and most experienced personnel should attempt the rescue. Sarah calmly explained that she had extensive rock climbing experience from her childhood in Colorado, where her father had been a mountain rescue volunteer. She had spent summers learning technical climbing and wilderness survival skills, training that none of her colleagues possessed. More importantly, she argued that her smaller size might actually be an advantage in the narrow canyon spaces where the SEALs were trapped. The debate continued for precious minutes as the commander weighed the risks. Sarah's medical skills were unquestioned, but her physical capabilities in such extreme conditions remained a concern for many in the room. The other medics continued to express doubt about her ability to handle the physical demands of the mission, particularly if she needed to help evacuate 3 injured men. Sarah knew this was her moment to prove herself. She had prepared for challenges like this her entire career, combining her medical expertise with survival skills that most military medics never needed to develop. She spoke with quiet confidence about her climbing experience and her understanding of high-altitude medicine, knowledge that would be crucial in the thin mountain air. The situation became more urgent as radio contact with the trapped SEALs grew weaker. Morrison's voice came through in broken transmissions, reporting severe injuries including what appeared to be internal bleeding, possible spinal damage, and extensive lacerations. The men were losing blood and body heat rapidly, and time was running out for any rescue attempt to be successful. Finally, the commander made his decision. Sarah would join the rescue team as the primary medic, supported by 2 experienced mountain rescue specialists from the base security team. She had exactly 20 minutes to gather her medical supplies and prepare for what everyone knew would be an extremely dangerous mission into the unstable canyon system. As Sarah quickly assembled her medical kit, selecting only the most essential equipment that she could carry during the technical climb, she felt the weight of everyone's expectations and doubts. Her colleagues watched her preparations with a mixture of concern and skepticism, still questioning whether she had the physical and mental strength to complete such a demanding rescue mission. The rescue team gathered at the helicopter landing pad as the aircraft prepared for the flight to the canyon. Sarah secured her climbing gear and medical supplies, running through mental checklists of the procedures she might need to perform in the field. She knew that once they reached the canyon, she would be the only qualified medical personnel available to save 3 lives, and failure was not an option. The helicopter ride to the canyon took 45 minutes through increasingly turbulent weather. Sarah sat between the 2 rescue specialists, Sergeant Mike Torres and Corpsman First Class David Kim, both experienced in mountain rescue operations. The aircraft shook violently as it fought against fierce wind gusts, and the pilot had to make several course corrections to avoid the worst of the storm systems moving through the area. As they approached the crash site, Sarah could see the devastation below. The rock slide had carved a new scar across the mountainside, with massive boulders scattered throughout the canyon like broken teeth. The helicopter pilot circled the area twice, searching for a safe landing zone, but the terrain was too unstable for a direct approach. They would have to land nearly a mile away and make the dangerous trek on foot. The moment Sarah stepped out of the helicopter, the mountain cold hit her like a physical blow. The temperature was well below freezing, with wind chill making conditions even more brutal. She quickly adjusted her gear and checked her medical supplies one final time, knowing that once they began the descent into the canyon, There would be no opportunity to return for forgotten equipment. Torres led the way as they began the treacherous climb down into the canyon system. The rock was loose and unstable, requiring careful placement of every step and handhold. Sarah's climbing experience proved invaluable as she navigated the technical sections, often finding routes that the larger men had difficulty following. Her smaller size allowed her to squeeze through narrow gaps between fallen boulders that blocked the path. 2 hours into the descent, they heard the first weak calls for help echoing from deep within the canyon. Morrison's voice carried on the wind, growing stronger as they got closer to the trapped location. Sarah felt a surge of relief knowing that at least one of the SEALs was still conscious and able to communicate, though she also recognized the strain and pain in his voice. The final approach to the trapped SEALs required a nearly vertical descent down a crack in the canyon wall. Sarah rigged the ropes with Torres and Kim, creating an anchor system that would allow them to reach the men and, more importantly, evacuate them back up the cliff face. The technical climbing skills she had learned as a child were now being put to the ultimate test. When Sarah finally rappelled into the small cave where the 3 SEALs were trapped, she was shocked by what she found. Morrison was conscious but clearly suffering from severe internal injuries, his face pale and drawn with pain. Rodriguez appeared to have a serious head injury and was drifting in and out of consciousness. Walsh was the most seriously injured, trapped under a large boulder with what appeared to be crushing injuries to his legs and possible spinal damage. The scene was far worse than the radio reports had indicated. All 3 men were suffering from severe hypothermia, in addition to their traumatic injuries. They had been trapped for over 6 hours in near-freezing temperatures, with minimal protection from the elements. Sarah immediately began triage, working quickly to assess each man's condition and prioritize her limited medical resources. Morrison tried to give her a status report, but Sarah could see that he was struggling to stay conscious. She quickly established intravenous lines in all 3 men, providing pain medication and fluids to combat shock and dehydration. The confined space of the cave made every medical procedure more challenging, requiring her to work in cramped conditions with limited light and equipment. The most critical case was clearly Walsh, who was showing signs of internal bleeding and possible spinal cord injury. The boulder pinning his legs was far too heavy for the rescue team to move safely, creating a complex extraction problem that would require careful coordination between medical treatment and technical rescue techniques. Sarah knew that any mistake in the extraction process could result in permanent paralysis or death. Sarah called up to Torres and Kim, requesting additional rope and rigging equipment to create a pulley system capable of lifting the massive boulder. While they worked to set up the extraction system, she continued providing emergency medical care to all 3 patients. Her training in both Eastern and Western medicine proved crucial, as she used acupuncture techniques to help manage pain and promote circulation in the freezing conditions. The weather outside the cave was continuing to deteriorate, with snow beginning to fall and visibility dropping rapidly. Sarah realized that they had a narrow window of time to complete the rescue before conditions became too dangerous for helicopter evacuation. Every decision she made in the next few hours would determine whether all 3 SEALs would survive. This ordeal. Working by headlamp in the confined cave, Sarah drew on every skill she had learned throughout her medical career. The combination of trauma medicine, wilderness survival, and traditional healing techniques created a unique approach to emergency care that none of her colleagues back at the base could have provided. This was her moment to prove that true healing required more than just following standard protocols. The extraction of Walsh from under the massive boulder required every ounce of Sarah's medical expertise and the technical skills of the entire rescue team. She coordinated the operation like a battlefield surgeon, directing Torres and Kim in setting up the complex pulley system, while simultaneously monitoring all 3 patients for signs of deteriorating condition. The cave echoed with the sound of metal on rock as they worked to position the lifting equipment. Sarah knew that the moment they lifted the boulder from Walsh's legs, he could go into severe shock from the sudden release of pressure and restoration of blood flow. This crushing syndrome was one of the most dangerous complications in rescue medicine, often proving fatal even when the initial extraction was successful. She prepared multiple IV lines and had emergency medications ready to counteract the potentially deadly effects, Rodriguez's head injury was becoming more concerning as time passed. He was showing signs of increasing intracranial pressure, which could result in permanent brain damage or death if not addressed quickly. Sarah used a combination of position therapy and medications to reduce the swelling, while also applying traditional pressure point techniques that helped improve blood flow to his brain. Morrison, despite his internal injuries, remained the most alert of the three men. He tried repeatedly to help with the rescue efforts, but Sarah firmly ordered him to remain still to prevent further damage to what she suspected were injured organs. His military training made it difficult for him to accept being passive during the rescue, but he gradually began to trust Sarah's medical judgment and expertise. The pulley system was finally ready, but Sarah faced a critical decision about the timing of Walsh's extraction. The weather outside was continuing to worsen, and they were rapidly approaching the point where helicopter evacuation would become impossible. However, rushing the medical preparation could result in Walsh's death during the extraction process. She had to balance the immediate medical needs against the deteriorating rescue window. Sarah made the call to begin the extraction. She positioned herself directly beside Walsh, monitoring his vital signs while Torres and Kim operated the pulley system. As the massive boulder slowly lifted away from his legs, Sarah watched carefully for any signs of cardiovascular collapse. Walsh screamed in pain as circulation returned to his crushed limbs, but his vital signs remained relatively stable. The moment the boulder was clear, Sarah began intensive treatment of Walsh's leg injuries. The damage was severe, with multiple fractures and extensive tissue trauma, but she was relieved to find that his spinal cord appeared to be intact. She quickly splinted the fractures and applied pressure bandages to control bleeding. Working with practiced efficiency, despite the cramped conditions and poor lighting. With Walsh stabilized, Sarah turned her attention to preparing all three men for the dangerous journey back up the canyon wall. Each patient required different considerations for the vertical evacuation. Rodriguez needed careful head and neck stabilization to prevent further brain injury. Morrison required monitoring for internal bleeding that could worsen during the physical stress of the climb. Walsh needed complete immobilization to protect his fractured legs. The rescue team rigged 3 separate evacuation systems, each designed for the specific medical needs of the patients. Sarah would need to accompany each man during his individual evacuation, providing continuous medical monitoring during the dangerous ascent. This meant making 3 separate climbs up the treacherous canyon wall, each time carrying full medical equipment while managing a critically injured patient. The first evacuation was Rodriguez, whose head injury made him the most time-sensitive case. Sarah secured herself to his rescue litter and began the slow ascent up the canyon wall. Every movement had to be carefully controlled to prevent jarring that could worsen his brain injury. The climb took nearly an hour, with frequent stops to check his condition and adjust his position. During Morrison's evacuation, Sarah noticed signs that his internal bleeding was worsening. His blood pressure was dropping and his pulse was becoming more rapid, indicating that he was going into shock. She had to make emergency adjustments to his IV fluids and medications while suspended hundreds of feet above the canyon floor, working with numbed hands in the freezing wind. Walsh, "S evacuation was the most technically challenging due to his leg injuries and the need for complete immobilization. Sarah had to coordinate carefully with Torres and Kim to ensure that the movement of the litter didn't cause further damage to his already severely injured limbs. The evacuation took over 90 minutes, with Sarah providing constant pain management and monitoring throughout the ascent. By the time all 3 SEALs reached the top of the canyon, Sarah had been working continuously for over 8 hours in brutal conditions. Her hands were numb from the cold, and she was exhausted from the physical demands of the multiple climbs. However, she knew that the most critical phase of the rescue was just beginning. Getting the men to the helicopter and then to advanced medical care would require maintaining their stabilized condition during transport. The helicopter pilot reported that weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly and that this would likely be their last opportunity for safe evacuation before the storm system made flying impossible. Sarah had to make quick decisions about each patient's transport needs while the rescue team loaded them into the aircraft. Every second counted as they prepared for the flight back to the naval base and the advanced trauma care that could save 3 lives. The helicopter flight back to the naval base was a race against time and weather. Sarah worked frantically in the cramped aircraft cabin, managing 3 critically injured patients while the helicopter battled severe turbulence and deteriorating visibility. The pilot reported that they were flying at the absolute limits of safe weather conditions, with ice forming on the aircraft's rotors and navigation equipment. Rodriguez's condition became increasingly unstable during the flight. His brain injury was causing dangerous fluctuations in his vital signs, and Sarah feared that he might not survive the journey to the hospital. She used every technique in her arsenal, combining traditional acupressure points with modern medication protocols to maintain his brain function and circulation. Her small hands moved with precision despite the violent shaking of the aircraft. Morrison's internal bleeding had accelerated during the stress of evacuation, and his blood pressure continued to drop despite Sarah's aggressive fluid replacement therapy. She suspected damage to his liver or spleen from the rockslide impact, injuries that would require immediate surgery once they reached the base. She radioed ahead to alert the trauma team to prepare for emergency abdominal surgery. Walsh remained the most stable of the 3 patients, though his leg injuries were severe enough to potentially end his military career. Sarah focused on pain management and preventing shock while monitoring for signs of infection or circulation problems in his damaged limbs. She knew that the next few hours would be critical in determining whether his legs could be saved. The helicopter touched down at the naval base just as the storm reached full intensity. Snow was falling heavily, and winds were gusting to dangerous levels that would have made landing impossible just minutes later. Sarah coordinated the transfer of all 3 patients to the trauma bay, providing detailed medical reports to the surgical teams while continuing to monitor their conditions. Dr. Peterson and the trauma team were amazed by the thoroughness of Sarah's field treatment and the detailed medical records she had maintained throughout the rescue operation. Despite the extreme conditions and limited equipment, she had provided care that rivaled what they could have done in a fully equipped hospital environment. Her combination of traditional and modern techniques had kept all 3 men alive through the most critical phase of their injuries. The next 18 hours were crucial as the 3 SEALs underwent emergency surgeries and intensive care treatment. Rodriguez required immediate brain surgery to relieve pressure from swelling and bleeding. Morrison needed extensive abdominal surgery to repair damage to his spleen and liver. Walsh underwent multiple orthopedic procedures to reconstruct his shattered leg bones and restore circulation to damaged tissues. Sarah remained at the hospital throughout the critical period, working closely with the surgical teams and providing continuity of care for the 3 men she had rescued. Her intimate knowledge of their injuries and responses to treatment proved invaluable as the doctors made complex medical decisions about their ongoing care. She had become more than just their rescuer. She was their primary advocate and medical guardian. The breakthrough came on the 2nd day when Rodriguez regained consciousness and began responding normally to neurological tests. The brain surgery had been successful, and while he would need extensive rehabilitation, his cognitive function appeared to be intact. Sarah was at his bedside when he opened his eyes, and his first words were to thank her for saving his life. Morrison's recovery was more gradual, but by the 3rd day, his internal bleeding had stopped, and his vital signs had stabilized. Surgical repair of his abdominal organs had been successful, though he would require weeks of recovery before returning to full activity. He told Sarah that he remembered her calm voice throughout the rescue operation and credited her with keeping him focused and alive during the darkest moments. Walsh's orthopedic surgeries were successful in saving his legs, though his recovery would be the longest and most challenging of the 3. Multiple fractures required extensive reconstruction with metal plates and screws, and he faced months of physical therapy. However, the early medical care that Sarah had provided in the canyon had prevented the infections and circulation problems that could have resulted in amputation. The news of the successful rescue spread quickly throughout the naval base and beyond. Sarah's colleagues, who had initially doubted her abilities, were now forced to acknowledge that her unique combination of skills and determination had accomplished something that few medical professionals could have achieved. The same officers who had questioned her unconventional methods now praised her innovative approach to emergency medicine. Commander Williams called Sarah into his office to commend her actions, and inform her that she was being recommended for the Navy Cross, one of the military's highest honors for heroism. He admitted that he had initially harbored doubts about her unconventional approach to medicine, but now recognized that her diverse training and unique perspective had been exactly what the situation required. The three SEALs themselves became Sarah's strongest advocates, telling anyone who would listen about her incredible courage and medical expertise. They described how her calm presence and skilled treatment had given them hope during their darkest hours trapped in the canyon. Morrison, Rodriguez, and Walsh formed a bond with Sarah that would last for the rest of their lives, considering her not just their rescuer, but their guardian angel. 6 months after the rescue, Sarah stood before a gathering of military officials, fellow medical personnel, and the families of the 3 SEALs she had saved. The ceremony at the Pentagon was unlike anything she had ever experienced, with high-ranking officers from all branches of the military present to witness her receiving the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism. The same colleagues who had once whispered about her unconventional methods now looked at her with respect and admiration. Rodriguez had made a complete recovery from his traumatic brain injury and returned to active duty with his SEAL team. His recovery had been remarkable, with no lasting cognitive effects from the severe head trauma he had suffered in the canyon. He credited Sarah's immediate and innovative treatment with preventing permanent brain damage that could have ended not only his military career, but his ability to live a normal life. Morrison, quote, "S abdominal injuries had healed completely, though the experience had changed his perspective on life and military service. He had been promoted to lieutenant commander and was now involved in training other special operations personnel in survival and emergency medicine techniques." He frequently spoke about how Sarah's calm professionalism under extreme pressure had been the defining factor in his survival. Walsh faced the longest recovery process due to the severity of his leg injuries, but his determination matched that of his rescuer. After months of intensive physical therapy and rehabilitation, he had regained full function of his legs and returned to limited duty with the SEALs. His recovery was considered miraculous by the orthopedic surgeons who had reconstructed his shattered bones, and they attributed his successful outcome to the excellent field care he had received immediately after his injuries. The rescue operation had transformed not only the lives of the 3 SEALs, but also Sarah's standing within the military medical community. Medical schools and military training programs began incorporating her innovative techniques into their curricula, recognizing that emergency medicine could benefit from integrating traditional healing practices with modern trauma care. Her approach became a model for treating patients in extreme and resource-limited environments. Sarah, quote, "S superiors had offered her numerous promotions and prestigious assignments following the rescue, but she chose to remain focused on patient care and training other medical personnel. She established a wilderness medicine program at the naval base, teaching other medics the climbing, survival, and traditional healing skills that had proved so crucial during the canyon rescue. Her classes became some of the most sought-after training opportunities in military medicine. The 3 SEALs maintained close relationships with Sarah long after their recovery. They considered her part of their extended military family and regularly visited her at the base. Morrison, Rodriguez, and Walsh often spoke at medical conferences about the importance of innovative thinking and diverse skill sets in emergency medicine, using their own rescue as a powerful example. Sarah, quote, "S story became legendary within Navy medical circles, but she remained characteristically humble about her achievements. She continued to study both traditional and modern healing practices, always seeking new ways to improve patient care and save lives. The doubts that had once surrounded her unconventional methods had been replaced by recognition that innovation and adaptability were essential qualities in military medicine. The rescue had profound effects beyond the immediate participants. Military medical training programs began emphasizing the importance of diverse skill sets and unconventional thinking in emergency situations. Sarah's integration of Eastern and Western medical practices became a template for developing more comprehensive approaches to trauma care in challenging environments. Years later, Sarah would reflect on the canyon rescue as the moment when she truly understood her calling as a healer. The experience had tested every aspect of her training, from technical medical skills to physical endurance to emotional strength. She had proven to herself and others that healing was about more than following standard protocols. It required creativity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to preserving life. The 3 SEALs she had saved went on to have distinguished military careers, each carrying with them the lessons they had learned about the power of determination and the importance of never giving up hope. They frequently told their story to other service members, emphasizing how one small woman with an unshakable belief in her abilities had accomplished what many thought impossible. Sarah's legacy extended far beyond that single rescue operation. She had changed perceptions about what it meant to be a military medic and demonstrated that true strength came not from physical size or conventional thinking, but from knowledge, preparation, and the courage to act when lives were at stake. The healer they thought wouldn't endure had not only survived but had transformed the lives of 3 elite warriors and revolutionized military emergency medicine. The Canyon rescue became a defining moment that proved healing had no boundaries, and that the most unlikely heroes could emerge in the most desperate circumstances. Sarah Chen had answered her calling as a healer in the most dramatic way possible, saving 3 lives and earning her place among the most respected medical professionals in military history.